Now, Ruth Marcus, who is the deputy editorial page editor of the Washington Post and also an opinion writer in her own right, has written a piece that talks about a final report from the FBI on Brett Kavanaugh that is almost 2 years past the date when the FBI said it would be ready. Are you hearing what I'm saying? In fact, the most laughable part of the FBI's recent letter to senators about the FBI's investigation of sexual assault allegations against now sitting Justice Brett Kavanaugh, the most telling part comes at the start. This is what it says, quote, "This responds to your letter dated August 1st, 2019, regarding the supplemental background investigation. We apologize for the extended delay in responding." End quote. Now, that's the opening line in the cover letter to this report from FBI Assistant Director Jill Tyson in her letter to Senators Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, and Christopher Coons, Democrat of Delaware. Extended delay? 2 years? You think? See, both the senators, Whitehouse and Coons, had asked for, quote, the courtesy of a response no later than August 30th, 2019. That's what they asked for back when this creepy shithead, Brett Kavanaugh, was being considered as one of another one of Trump's appointees to the Supreme Court. So the courtesy of a response no later than August 30th, 2019. That's what the two senators asked for. The date of the actual response, June 30th, 2021. And it's no coincidence that it took an entirely new administration, Joe Biden's, and Senator Whitehouse's incessant prodding of Biden administration nominees to finally get some answers. Now, this letter from the FBI, which was delivered, like I just mentioned, June 30th, was made public yesterday, Thursday, the 22nd. It offers a perfect illustration of the Trump administration's attitude where it concerned congressional oversight, which was, fuck 'em. That was the Trump attitude. And the way in which the supposedly professional FBI allowed itself to be cowed, to be intimidated, and ultimately tarnished by its subservience to the orange vomit who squatted in the White House for 4 years. Now, according to Ruth Marcus, the letter discloses, and some headlines about this letter have trumpeted, that the FBI, quote, received over 4,500 tips, including phone calls and electronic submissions, after reopening the Kavanaugh investigation, following the allegations against him by Christine Blasey Ford and Deborah Ramirez. Now, if you remember, Kavanaugh's original Judiciary Committee hearing had ended a few days before the allegations became public. But anyway, let us not be misled by that number, 4,500. It doesn't mean there's any more evidence about Kavanaugh's conduct today than there was previously. But allegations like those against Kavanaugh produced a lot of calls from a lot of people with time on their hands and perhaps a screw or two loose. We know that. 4,500 complaints, okay. But the more significant part comes at the end of the letter from the FBI to the two senators. Quote, The Security Division section handling the background investigation and supplemental background investigation provided all relevant tips to the Office of White House Counsel, end quote. Relevant tips? Did I say relative? I meant relevant. What were those relevant tips? How many were there? How potentially serious? The letter doesn't say. And of course, we don't know. What did then White House counsel Donald McGahn do with the relevant tips were concerned Brett Kavanaugh's ascension to the Supreme Court, huh? That we do know. We know what McGahn did. Not a damn thing. McGahn had no interest in discovering what his hand-picked nominee had done or not done. What Don McGahn had interest in was ensuring that Brett Kavanaugh be confirmed. To hell with the facts. If there was any follow-up within the FBI itself, there's no indication of that in this report, this letter. And as Ruth Marcus points out, that is the outrage here. The FBI's investigation into sexual assault allegations against Kavanaugh was not designed to uncover the truth. Of course not. It was a shoddy enterprise whose mission was to satisfy enough disquieted senators like Republican Jeff Flake of Arizona, Susan Collins of Maine, satisfy them just enough to get Kavanaugh across the finish line. And the FBI's defense of this shitty investigation, and they outline their defense in the letter, is that the FBI conducts these investigations under protocols established during the Obama administration. And in these circumstances, the FBI isn't conducting a wide-ranging, follow-the-evidence criminal inquiry, but they're serving a client, in this case, the Trump White House. In other words, you might say that the FBI was just, well, you know, following orders. Now, as Jill Tyson, the FBI assistant director who wrote this, as she puts in her letter, quote, the FBI does not initiate a supplemental background investigation in the absence of instructions from the requesting entity. Remember, that's Trump. In addition, the FBI does not have authority to unilaterally conduct further investigative activity absent instructions from the requesting entity, end quote. Okay. As Ruth Marcus points out, that may be an explanation, but that's not a defense. Or it's a defense that underscores the inadequacy of the current arrangement. When we're investigating people who are going to have a Supreme Court or a judicial appointment for life. The tip line where all these calls came in was, in fact, call it a funnel to nowhere. It didn't get information to investigators eager to follow up on it. Instead, as Marcus points out, it was a distraction device to shunt aside those eager, even desperate to get what they thought was relevant, to an investigative agency disinclined to do anything about it. So yeah, a lot of the calls that went to that tip line were bullshit. They're crazy people, but a lot of them weren't. 7 Democratic senators, including White House Coons and Judiciary Committee Chairman Richard Durbin, wrote to FBI Director Chris Wray in a letter Wednesday just passed, saying, quote, if the FBI was not authorized to or did not follow up on any of the tips that it received from the tip line, it is difficult to understand the point of having a tip line at all, end quote. So how could the FBI, supposedly this country's premier investigative agency, fail to push back at being so hamstrung by the Trump gang? How could it let its reputation be used to conceal a whitewash? Those are extremely naive questions. Ruth Marcus is asking them for the simple fact that they are extremely naive. We know how it happened. There was a criminal gang of fascists who, for 4 years, squatted at the top of the government of the United States, and in that process corrupted every single agency it came in contact with. Ruth goes on, as White House put it during an interview with her, quote, "Now they've shown us that a background investigation can be tanked at White House counsel's request." That was McGahn. "And they won't be truthful in real time about White House counsel's request that it be tanked." End quote. So Trump nominated this guy based on some bullshit people squeaked into his filthy ears, and then McGahn was given the task of getting the job done. Get it done. We don't want to hear any reasons why it can't be done or shouldn't be done. If you don't want us to get that information, don't dig it up. You see how it worked? You see how it worked? Donald McGahn, like Donald Trump, was there to corrupt and destroy our system of governance. Now, the Democratic senators, in their letter to this hapless Jill, what's her last name? Jill Tyson, ask, among other things, that the FBI, well, actually they're writing to, not to her, but to Christopher Wray, the current director of the FBI. But they asked, among other things, that the FBI provide what they're calling all relevant tips about Kavanaugh that was turned over to the Trump White House counsel, McGahn, which probably is not going to happen. But this is an opportunity for the new administration, the Biden administration, and the FBI to reconsider how background checks are conducted, and for the Senate, this won't happen either, to ensure that the process delivers the necessary information so that the Senate can perform its advice and consent role. And keep in mind, please, that during the Trump years, there was no such role for Senate. Advice and consent? Horseshit. They were an impediment, something to get around, something to corrupt. Ruth Marcus closes with this sentence, and so will I. 2 sentences. In the frenzied final days of the Kavanaugh confirmation, Don McGahn kept insisting to Senator Coons that the FBI investigation was being conducted, quote, by the book, end quote. If that is so, the book needs rewriting. Ruth Marcus at the Washington Post trying to explain in a very oblique kind of way that we have a criminal, a serious criminal, a potential rapist on the Supreme Court, a drunk, a thorough asshole. And he is there because Donald Trump and Donald McGahn decided to put him there with the help of the filthy Mitch McConnell, this fascist, turtle-looking little pig who sees the Senate as his personal playground and uses it as such. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.